Picture this. So you're scrolling through your social media feed on a relaxing, peaceful Saturday evening, but nevertheless expecting to see tons of viral footage of massive crowds.
My little ghosts in the back row of society's courtroom. The one with the heavy silence nobody dares to question. The one who walks around like nothing ever happened, even though everything did to you. Welcome, you beautiful disasters. Welcome to the show they tried to cancel before you ever stepped on stage. You see, you're not broken, you're documented. I can smell it on you. The stench of false guilt, that twisted perfume of survival mixed with betrayal. Like you've been apologizing for things your shadow never even touched. Tell me, when did your name become evidence? When did your kindness become the motive? When did your silence become a confession? They built the case against you out of dust and whispers. They put chains on your spirit with nothing but rumors. And it worked. 9 fucking years. 9 years of dodging questions you never had the answers to. 9 years of waking up and remembering. This is still your face. This is still your name. This is still your sentence. Even though there was no crime. Let me read your energy for a second. You don't speak much anymore. You laugh in short bursts. Almost like you're checking if it's still legal to feel joy. You've mastered the art of nodding while dying inside. You've made shrinking look graceful, but I see it. That rage you never gave permission to grow. That fire that kept getting smothered by every just forget about it. Maybe they were confused. Try to move on. Move on. Move on. as if you're carrying a scratch. You're dragging a whole fucking war zone behind you. You've been hunted, not haunted, chased, marked, targeted, for being the one thing this world fears the most, innocent and awake. You became a mirror, didn't you? And when people looked at you, they didn't see you. They saw everything they were guilty of. And that made you dangerous. That made you the threat. Because if someone like you could exist, what excuse would they have left? So they spun the narrative, flipped the script, painted you with shadows until your own reflection didn't recognize you. And you let them, because deep down, some part of you thought, if I just stay quiet, if I just play nice, this will all go away. But it didn't, because they weren't after justice, they were after control, and you slipped through the cracks too many times. You survived when you were supposed to collapse. You smiled when you were supposed to beg. You healed in secret when they needed you to stay bleeding in public. And still, you stayed. You kept showing up with your hands empty, while they kept checking you for weapons you never carried. Let me guess. You stopped telling people how bad it really was, because their faces couldn't hold the weight of your truth. Because it couldn't have been that bad, right? Because there's no way they did all that to you, right? Because your story sounded too real to be real. But I'm not them. I'm not here to make you small enough to swallow. I'm here to spit gasoline on that voice in your gut that never shut up. The one that whispered, you didn't deserve any of it. The one that said, they were wrong about you. All of them. The one they tried to surgically remove with silence, shame, and suspicion. And yet, here, you are. Breathing like you weren't supposed to make it this far. Smirking like your name ain't scorched into 100 lies. Existing in a body that's been exiled but never conquered. 9 years, 9 winters, 9 vacuum calendars full of people forgetting how to say sorry, while you kept rewriting your pain into patience. Let them call you obsessed. Let them say you're still stuck on it. They don't know what it's like to be hunted for nothing. They don't know the weight of innocence when it becomes a crime scene. But I bet you think this is all coincidence. That it just happened this way. That life just got confused and took it out on you. Nah, this was deliberate, calculated, a chess game where you weren't even supposed to be a piece. But you moved anyway. You moved anyway. You want to know the funny part? The world kept waiting for you to break, to fold, to disappear into the narrative they built. And yet, you kept existing like a glitch in their little system. You kept being real in a world allergic to truth. You kept waking up, and that scared the living show out of them. You kept waking up, and that scared the living show out of them. Because people like you don't die the way they expect. You rot beautifully. You decay into awareness. You learn how to weaponize your wounds, and every scar they gave you starts whispering. They tried to make you doubt your own timeline, gaslighted your memories until you questioned the strength of your own past. You remember that, don't you? The confusion that felt like drowning in invisible hands. Every time you tried to speak your truth, they'd tilt their heads and smile like you were crazy. But that smile wasn't disbelief. It was fear. Because deep down, they knew the truth could tear down everything they built. You weren't losing your mind. You were shedding the illusions they hung over you. And that process, it looks insane from the outside. When a caged mind starts breaking open, the world mistakes freedom for madness. That's what you became, a walking contradiction of their design. Too aware to control, too wounded to destroy. You carry that look now. I can see it. That stillness that makes people uncomfortable. That calm that comes after surviving too much. You don't even argue anymore. You just know. You've stopped trying to convince anyone. Because you realize truth doesn't beg to be believed. It waits patiently. It sits behind your eyes like a loaded gun, watching, listening, remembering. And it remembers everything, doesn't it? The betrayal. The nights you stayed awake, wondering if they were going about you. The way your reflection started looking guilty. The way your body flinched when someone said your name. Too rapidly. You turned paranoia into an art form just to stay alive in a story that never belonged to you. You started studying people. Every tone, every blink, every twitch of the mouth. Because survival taught you psychology better than any textbook ever could. You learned that people don't lie with their words. They lie with their energy. That's why you stopped trusting smiles. That's why small talk makes your skin itch. You see too much now. You read the tremors in a voice before the sentence even ends. You catch the betrayal before it's spoken. That's what they created. A hyper-aware version of you. And they thought they broke you. They didn't realize they upgraded you. You went from naive to nuclear, from harmless to haunting, from soft-spoken to psychologically armed. Every year they hunted you, something inside you adapted. You grew fangs in places they didn't think you had teeth. You learned to smile like nothing's wrong, while plotting your emotional resurrection. And somewhere along the way, you stopped needing their validation. You stopped begging to be understood. You just watched. Watched them perform their fake innocence. Watched them congratulate each other for surviving you. Watched them build their reputations on the ruins of your name. And through it all, you just kept walking. Through smoke, through silence, through the disbelief that you could still exist. Because that's the ultimate revenge, isn't it? Not screaming, not proving, just being. Being the contradiction that shouldn't exist. Being the one they couldn't erase. You ever notice how quiet it got? How the world that once screamed your name suddenly pretended you didn't exist. That's not peace. That's strategy. They don't talk about you anymore because your silence became too loud. Because every word they say about you still tastes like guilt. Because deep down, they know they built their safety on your suffering. And it's starting to crack. You feel it too. The shift. The way the air changes when truth starts to crawl back into the room. It's slow, it's subtle, but it's there. You can sense it behind your ribs, like an old storm remembering where to strike. Your intuition is turning prophetic. You can sense lies the way animals sense earthquakes. And that's what makes you dangerous now. You've become untouchable. Not because you're invincible, but because you've already been destroyed once. And nothing about the second time scares you. That's what they never understood. They thought breaking you would end you. But pain doesn't erase people like you. It remakes them. It remolds your soul into something sharper. You start laughing at pain. You start collecting it like evidence. You turn it into architecture. Every heartbreak becomes a wall. Every betrayal a pillar. Every humiliation a staircase leading out of the fire. And you kept climbing. Even with blood on your hands that wasn't yours. Even with the weight of 9 fetid years of accusations and absence and echoing silence. You climbed with no applause, no reassurance, no audience. Just that inner whisper. The one they tried to drown, but couldn't. The one that said, you were never the villain. You're not here to prove your innocence anymore. You're here to embody it. You're not here to forgive them. You're here to outlast them. Because you already have. You're still breathing in a world that built your coffin before you even sinned. And that, my dear, that's the sweetest kind of vengeance there is. That's the sweetest kind of vengeance there is. And yet, you still catch yourself flinching when people speak kindly. You still brace for impact when someone reaches out their hand. Because somewhere in your nervous system, you're still waiting for the trap door. You've been conditioned like a hunted animal. Reward equals punishment. Comfort equals betrayal. Hope equals another setup. They trained you to expect loss. Not in one big moment. No. They were patient. It was death by erosion. Little betrayals. Tiny cuts. The kind of wounds that bleed emotionally, not visibly. The kind that make you question your own capacity for joy. Because when you've been blamed for something you never did, and punished for it for 9 whole years, you stop dreaming in color. You start filtering your thoughts through the lens of, what if they twist this too? You catch yourself editing your own truth before it ever leaves your mouth. And that's the part that should have broken you, right? But it didn't. You adapted. You evolved into a creature built for psychological war. You know what you became? A walking contradiction. Soft voice, heavy history, gentle eyes, battlefield soul. You became someone people felt before they understood. You'd walk into a room and the energy would shift. Not because you said anything, but because you carried the weight of years no one dared ask about. You made people uncomfortable with nothing but your presence. And it's not because you're dark, it's because you're real. And real makes cowards sweat. Real triggers shame in people still pretending. Real pulls the mask off without touching it. And that's why they tried to cage you. Not because you were dangerous, but because you reflected the danger in them. Every time you spoke your truth, it cracked open their carefully curated illusions. You started fires just by existing. Not the chaotic kind. No, not anymore. The quiet kind. The kind that burns without flames. The kind that makes people confess to things you never asked about. That's power. The kind they'll never give you credit for. Because giving you credit means admitting what they did. It means acknowledging the story they tried to bury. The one where you were the hero, not the villain. And yet you've carried both titles, worn both masks. You've been the monster in their gossip and the martyr in your own silence. You've cried in bathrooms, smiled at funerals, laughed at your own rock bottoms just to survive another day of pretending everything's fine. It wasn't fine. It was war. A slow, psychological slaughter. And the battlefield was always your own mind. You started questioning whether healing was even worth it. Because every time you tried, someone came back swinging. You learned not to celebrate too loudly. You kept your joy in shadows. Because you knew happiness made you visible. And visibility made you vulnerable. But something in you didn't die. And that's the part they'll never understand. They thought guilt would rot you from the inside. They thought shame would silence you. They thought isolation would crush you. But instead, you mutated. You grew teeth in your thoughts. You wrapped your trauma in sarcasm, folded your grief into jokes too dark for normal people. You became the punchline and the prophecy. You started speaking in riddles, not because you wanted to confuse people, but because your truth was too complex for the surface level minds that hurt you. You became fluent in pain, fluent in reading what people aren't saying, fluent in recognizing when someone's only hugging you to feel better about themselves. You know the language of betrayal. It lives under your tongue like a second voice. And every time you open your mouth, you choose which version of yourself gets to speak. Not because you're fake, because you've been studied like a crime scene. You had to become the forensics expert of your own life. Even your memories were put on trial. You tell your story and watch their eyes glaze over, and silence. That's complicity wearing perfume. They don't talk about that part, do they? They talk about how you changed, about how you're not the same anymore. Of course you're not the same. How could you be? You buried a version of yourself no one even knew was dying. You gave eulogies for parts of your spirit in rooms where no one noticed you were grieving. You mourned in advance because you already knew the ending before the story was even told. You've always known. There's this look you get now. When people ask you things like, "How have you been?" You smile, polite, automatic. But behind your eyes, there's a whole museum of wreckage, memories archived in silence, lies laminated into facts, and yet you still show up, still walk into rooms, still answer the question, because somewhere deep beneath all the war and weather and wasted years, something unkillable still breathes in you. It doesn't shout, it doesn't scream, it watches and waits, and remembers every goddamn name. It watches and waits and remembers every goddamn name. Not out of revenge, not in the cartoonish, bloodthirsty way they expect, but in silence, with that slow burn stare that says, "I saw everything. I forgot nothing. I survived all of it." There's a strange kind of power in that, the kind of power they can't measure, because it doesn't wear a crown or carry a sword. It sits in your bones. It breathes in your pauses. It hides behind your calm demeanor, while your soul sharpens its knives. You stopped reacting. You started studying. That's when everything shifted. Because the moment you stopped explaining yourself, they lost access to the version of you they could control. You stopped correcting their lies. You let them speak. Let them build their stories. Let them wrap themselves in fiction. Because truth doesn't chase liars. It buries them in time. And time, oh, time has been your most loyal accomplice. 9 years, 9 cycles of becoming, of cracking open and sealing shut, of watching people switch up, switch sides, switch masks, until your trust stopped being a door and became a mirror. You don't open up anymore. You reflect. And people hate that. They hate being seen without their disguise on. You can feel it, can't you? How people hesitate around you. How they avoid eye contact, like you're staring through them. Because you are. Because you see it all now. The guilt tucked behind their jokes. The fear trembling underneath their just checking in messages. They want to know what version of you survived. They want to know if the quiet one they ruined is the same one they'll have to face now. But you're not quiet anymore. You're surgical. You've become the kind of presence that makes the truth uncomfortable. Not loud, not dramatic, just undeniable. You don't expose people with words. You do it with energy, with that calm that feels like a storm is thinking. You don't need to speak rage. You radiate it, controlled, contained, compressed into something colder than fire. That's what trauma taught you. How to hold 1,000 screams in your throat and still say, "I'm fine," without blinking. How to stand in rooms filled with people who let you burn and pretend it doesn't smell like smoke. How to carry the ashes of your own reputation without asking anyone to help you sweep. They think you're bitter. You're not bitter. You're awake. There's a difference. Bitterness is loud and chaotic. Awakening is silent and strategic. It's choosing your battles, not because you're scared, but because you've outgrown the need to prove you were right. And you were right. You know that now. The things they said you imagined. You remember the looks, the timing, The passive comments that came right after your victories. The way they tried to diminish you the moment you stood a little taller. The praise that felt like poison. The jokes that weren't funny. You remember every subtle assassination of your character dressed up as concern. And that memory? It's clean. It's clear. It's carved into your awareness like scripture. You've learned to smile at the very people who dragged your name through the dirt. Not because you've forgiven them, but because you don't owe them anything. Not anger, not closure, not access. They think your silence is weakness. It's not. It's mercy. The last thread of restraint you haven't let snap. Yet. Because part of you knows they wouldn't survive the truth if you told it raw. Not the watered down version, not the digestible edit, the real truth. The one that would set your story on fire and leave their lies in ashes. But you don't need to speak it. You're already living it. Every step you take is a rebuttal. Every breath is evidence. You walking through this world without bitterness is the loudest scream they'll ever hear. And it's been 9 years. 9 years of watching them thrive on your downfall. 9 years of them laughing louder every time you faded into silence. 9 years of shrinking, of fading, of shape-shifting into someone just safe enough to avoid being punished again. But that version of you, that soft, apologetic, half-alive version of you, they don't get to keep it anymore. You've been kind long enough. You've been quiet long enough. You've swallowed your own story just to protect people who'd sell your name for applause. You've buried your outrage beneath your manners. And still, they called you angry. You gave them compassion in return for judgment. They labeled it unstable. You isolated to avoid hurting anyone. They said you were cold. Well. Look who finally woke up with smoke in their lungs and chaos in their blood. Welcome to the wrong side of average. Where you're not just breaking rules, you're breaking patterns. Where every step you take sounds like a siren going off in the system that was never built for you to win. They didn't just notice you, they filed reports, they held meetings, they pulled out the old dusty playbook labeled Contain the Anomaly. Because what you're doing right now, that ain't just success, that ain't just glow up. That's unlawful excellence, that's felony level evolution. That's you going so hard, they had to call the alphabet boys just to feel safe. You ever win so damn hard that the entire room changes temperature when you walk in? Yeah, that's this level. That's the kind of win that doesn't come from books or podcasts or someone else's blueprint. That comes from rage that fermented into resilience. That comes from wounds that learned how to whisper directions. That comes from being buried so deep under disrespect, silence, and failure that you clawed your way up with teeth made of spite and hands blistered by belief. You didn't just climb, you dug. Through generations of trauma, through systems that don't blink when you bleed, through voices that told you, be realistic, realistic, realistic. They said be realistic while you were building a cathedral out of ashes, a kingdom out of no's, an empire out of every door that got slammed in your face. You want to know why they're uncomfortable? Because you weren't supposed to flip the script. You were supposed to sit still, play nice, smile on cue, and maybe, get a participation trophy if you begged loud enough.